just returned from a road trip that was about 2,000 miles. And by just returned, I mean it was about a month or a month and a half ago. At the time, I was living in Vegas, so I traveled from Vegas up to Lake Tahoe, over to the West Coast, down to LA, and then back over to Vegas. Along for the trip, I took 3 cameras. I took my RED Komodo, I took my Fujifilm X-Pro1, and then I took a Polaroid camera. The 35mm focal length has been my go-to for quite some time now, so I decided that on this trip, I would just use a 35 on all 3 of these cameras. The RED and the X-Pro1 have 35mm lenses, all manual. They were both super cheap. I got them both on Amazon. And then the Polaroid has 35 to 40mm focal length. It says it on the lens, and that's what I saw online. So for the most part, all 3 of these lenses had about the same focal length. This road trip was definitely an experience, and I just want to go over my thoughts on taking these 3 cameras and only having a 35mm focal length on each one. At first, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to bring the RED. I just wanted to have a nice, easy trip. I didn't want to fuss with any of my gear, and sometimes the RED does require a little bit more attention with rigging, and I know you can run it pretty simply with just the lens and batteries, but it still takes a little bit more time than just a regular camera. In the end, I did decide to bring the RED. It was too good of an opportunity to get content on the RED. And also, I brought everything I own on the RED in a Pelican case. However, I decided I would try and run it as minimal as possible with just handles, the battery, and I would try and avoid the monitor. And like I mentioned, I only brought one lens for the camera, the 35mm Bright & Star all-manual lens. Got it on Amazon. It was super cheap, but honestly, it's produced some awesome image quality. My only complaint or wish for this lens is that it had a higher f-stop. Since I'm shooting outdoor and landscapes, it only goes up to f16, and I wish it just bumped up to f22 like my other lenses, just so that I could really nail focus, especially since I wasn't running a monitor for the most part on the RED. Also, if I could have stopped down, let's say f22, I probably would have been able to avoid an ND filter. I'm not really the biggest fan of messing with my shutter speed or shutter angle. I had to run an ND. I had the Prism FX ND filter with a step-up ring for this camera whenever it got too bright. I made an interesting choice for this trip that I'm still not sure how I feel about it, if I like it or if I don't like it, but I shot everything in a 2:1 aspect ratio so I could shoot everything in 50 frames per second. I'm usually a 24 frames per second person. However, I wanted to be able to slow down my footage, get rid of some of that shake, especially since the RED doesn't have image stabilization and the lens doesn't have image stabilization. I figured now was the time to try it. Obviously, I thought maybe I can shoot some stuff in 24, other stuff in 50, but again, I wanted to make this trip super easy. I didn't want to have to switch back and forth, and if I did give myself the out of sometimes shooting 24, sometimes 50, then I would probably end up shooting both times. So I decided I'd keep it consistent and just shoot 50 frames per second on everything. The only exception was when I ran a time lapse. The image I got on the RED was amazing. I was really happy with it, and shooting 35mm for everything was okay. There was only a few times where I wish I had a tighter shot or a wider angle, but for the most part, 35mm was awesome. Overall, I was really happy with the footage, and I liked that the 35mm feel of the video would match pretty closely to the 35mm photos I got. So the theme of this trip was to enjoy it, keep it simple, but also experiment a little bit since I had no pressure to shoot anything. And I had this Polaroid camera that I got from my friend Jason since Christmas, and I had yet to use it. So I figured now was the perfect time to take it on this trip and try it out. The camera actually came with some film, so I decided that's all I would use. I didn't want to spend a crazy amount of time getting a bunch of different shots, retaking everything, so I decided I would just take the shot, live with the results, and honestly, I was really happy with them. So the film camera I got was the Polaroid Now Plus Gen 1, and this thing was really fun to use. However, I would definitely recommend getting the app so you can dial in manually all your settings, you can set timers, and do all that stuff. Also, just a quick tip, don't leave your film in the car for months, especially when you live in Vegas and it's over 90 degrees a lot of the time. Yeah. But after a little bit of trial and error, we did get some cool shots, and then we did get some shots that weren't technically good. I think halfway through the trip, I got my favorite photo at the Golden State Bridge. I just think the colors and the image looked awesome. So the camera says it's about a 35 to 40 millimeter focal length, which matches pretty closely to the X-Pro1 and the RED Komodo footage. And overall, it was just really fun to use, and it has me interested in film. And I've wanted a Leica M6 for a while, so it's not good. I shouldn't do it. It's not good. Of course, my final camera is my trusted Fujifilm X-Pro1, super old camera. So let's talk about the lens. I have the 35mm TT Artisan all manual super cheap lens that I got on Amazon. I talk about it all the time. Unless I have my 60mm macro lens that I just got a few months ago, I have been using that a lot more. But other than that, this 35mm lives on the X-Pro1, and I also paired it with the Everyday Filter by Polar Pro, and I was really happy with the images I got on this trip. I've had this camera long enough to know exactly what it can do and what it can't do, and how to push it just a little bit more. And honestly, even though it's a super old, super cheap camera and the lens is super cheap from Amazon, I've gotten some amazing image quality out of it, and I'm really happy with the results and just using this overall. But obviously it has its shortcomings. It has an awful screen, super laggy menu, autofocus is not very good at all, so you can see having to use all manual focus as a negative. I enjoy it, so it's not a negative for me, but I have made a whole YouTube video about this camera, so if you're interested in the X-Pro1, go check it out. I wanted to touch on why just the 35mm focal length for this trip. I have noticed that I've been hiding some of my images that aren't so good or somewhat mid with just a tighter compression or making it wider, just making it different than what it actually looks like, and then it makes it a little bit better. And with 35mm, you can't do that as much. From what I've seen, what I've noticed, the 35mm is closer to what we see in real life, so you really have to practice your composition. And that's something that I haven't been the best at composing my shots. I would just maybe make it tighter to make it a little bit cooler, or make it wider, things like that. So with the 35mm, again, I'm practicing my composition a little bit more. I'm really taking notice of what I'm capturing in the image. I've also noticed that when looking at a 35mm photo, it's more realistic to what I remember. So it just feels a little bit more like a memory than just an awesome shot I took. And shooting on a 35mm focal length on the X-Pro1 all manual lens, for some reason it just makes me feel like I'm shooting on film a little bit. I really want to shoot film. I did pick up this cheap point and shoot film camera that I'm going to be testing out soon, so stay tuned for that review. So overall, number one thing, if you get a chance to go on a road trip, do it. This is my second super long road trip, and I just want to do more. I love just driving, seeing new places, exploring, going out there, taking pictures, taking videos. The whole thing is just really fun to me. And it also made me realize that you can do a lot with just a Polaroid and a cheap camera like the X-Pro1. And yes, I did have the RED, but I would have been perfectly fine without it. The 35mm focal length continues to be my favorite focal length. However, I am always looking to change it up, try new things. So let me know what your favorite focal length down below. Maybe I'll pick it up and try it. One focal length that I am possibly thinking of trying again is a fisheye. When I first got a camera, it was with a fisheye lens. It was kind of crazy. I didn't know anything. It was cheap on Amazon. I bought it, and that's what I started taking pictures on, fisheye. So now I realize how crazy that is, but maybe I'll go back to a fisheye and just see how much I've improved since then. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.